So you have been a monk for nearly 20 years. And I feel like the question I always want to ask monks, well, there's normally like 100 of them, but what was the moment that you realized external achievement would never be enough?
Great question. It was, I think, a moment when in my youth already, transitioning from teenage years into my adult life, I was watching the people around me. And I think what I started to notice was one trend, which was that a lot of the people that were older in my life, they would reminisce about the younger years of their life as if that was the peak of their life. And that from then on, it kind of was like, okay, I mean, we still have some degree of fun in our life, but it wasn't like it used to be. And I had the privilege of having had the contact of some spiritual people, monks even, and I had talked to them, and I was seeming to get the opposite answer, where they would say that my life's peaking. Sort of the more I live, the more I grow, the more I evolve. And I mean, couldn't say that it was just that, but it played a huge role in my mind because it really made me realize that I didn't want to face a life where it had already peaked then in my early 20s, and from then on it would just be a sort of coping. And I'm not saying that of course everybody is like that, but it was an interesting observation, and it really made me reconsider what I wanted to do with my life and what I wanted to dedicate my life to.
I'm Melissa Monti. This is Mind Love. Is there anything that becoming a monk that you thought it would solve, but it didn't?
I definitely had different ideas about what it would be like. What it would solve, not necessarily, because I wasn't trying to solve something. Being a monk for me was a natural consequence of dedicating my life to a particular cause. For me, it was, I want to give 100% of my time and 100% of myself to becoming the best version of me that I can be so that I can serve everyone with whatever time I have available to me. And I believe that the way to do that most effectively for me was to achieve, for want of a better expression, some form of enlightenment. It was really about, if I can become something greater, I can touch people's lives in a way that an average person can't. And along the way, whatever I get, I already am sharing. I'm already doing my best, even though I've not reached that enlightenment yet. And so if you ask me what it hasn't solved, I'm not enlightened yet.
Bummer.
So I'm not at the end of that journey.
What do you think the journey of being a monk has changed the most fundamentally about you?
Simplicity. And simplicity for me and clarity mean the same thing. And I enjoy very much the fact that my life is not complicated. And I try to help other people get there too, because I don't think you have to be a monk to achieve that. But being a monk certainly helps get there a little faster. Because obviously the lifestyle is predicated on a few lifestyle choices and requirements. But it really helps to identify the clutter that we have in our mind when we wake up every day. What am I going to wear today? What am I going to do? Who do I have to impress? Who do I have to be in front of today? And for me, it was very much a simplification of all of that. I wear the same thing every day. I show up in the same way. I stand for the same things, no matter who is standing in front of me. And it was an incredible power to tap into. It's an incredible transformation when you have such clarity over what it is that you're meant to be doing every single day of your life. There's no room for doubt to creep in and to start stagnating your life.
That speaks to me because I mentioned right before we got on that I've just had so many ups and downs this pregnancy. This is my third baby, not my third pregnancy. I had a couple of miscarriages last year. And my first pregnancy, I recognized halfway through that I had prenatal depression, and meditation definitely helped get me out of that. And so I was meditating 2 or 3 times a day for at least 20 minutes. That's when I got certified in, or do you call it certified in transcendental meditation? I trained in transcendental meditation. Very helpful for me. And I didn't really experience that with Maven and my second pregnancy. And I think I created a story within myself that, oh, well, I found the meditation and it solved it. And so this pregnancy, I have felt all those just depressive tendencies come back, and it's not constant. It's like once a week. maybe twice a week, and it'll just be like this overwhelming wave of crying. But the story that I've keep getting attached to is actually, I think it's because I live in a small mountain town where things are simple. And I came from LA before that. And I think a part of me really wanted to be the simple girl. I loved kind of detaching from all of the conveniences I was used to in LA. I loved and hated it. I'll be honest. Like, it was very hard, but I liked that I was going through that. And I sort of had a peace with that the last few years. And there's something during this pregnancy where I'm just like, I just wish I was an LA girl again. Why am I here? I'm not simple at all. And so something about, I knew, because today's been a hard day. And I was like, should I cancel this interview? I was like, I have a feeling I'm going to need this conversation. And so there's something about the simplicity, but it's difficult. Do you ever, I mean, you're a monk, so I feel like the answer is going to be no. But like, do you ever feel like, it'd be really fun to just be really complicated for a while?
You know what it is? I mean, you think so? Being a monk, that it's like, oh no, it's a walk in the park. It's not. I mean, of course, look, we still have a mind, memories of a different life, and the thing is that it could be easy for us as monks, and I mean, many do live that reality, to just stay in their monastery, never face the world, and sort of live in that bubble. But it's not my reality. I do believe that in the time and age that we're in right now, monks can't afford to be that. I think that one of the biggest sadnesses that you see in the world is when people have achieved great things or have gone through incredible experiences that have shaped them in an important way, and then they isolate themselves from the world. And I think you rob people of the chance to learn from that, to grow from that. I certainly have grown so much from being exposed to different kind of people and different experiences. And so I like to be a monk that's out in the world a little bit. And it comes with its challenges because, of course, I'm mixing it up with people that live very different lifestyles to me. And so your mind plays games with you. It's the same thing. Being an LA girl in a small town, your mind is still going to play those games with you, as in, is this right for me? Is something else better for me? And so those kind of thoughts can enter my mind, no doubt about it. I think the thing that's more interesting to know is not, do the things creep up inside of me, it's how do I deal with them? What is my response to them? I think that's the more interesting conversation. And so my response is not to sort of bash them away as if it's something terrible and evil that's happening, but rather for me to redecide. It's a re-decision that gets made every day. It's like, okay, so the question has arisen again, is this the life for me? And I get to redecide with the new version of me, because the person that decided to become a monk 20 years ago is not the same person that sits here in front of you today. And so for me to just sit here and say, well, because I gave my word 20 years ago, I now have to stick to it no matter what. There is a truth to that. There's a power to that. But for me, what's even more powerful is that I get to re-choose that every day. And I get to sit here and say, does this still make sense to me? And yes, it does. Why? Because I believe that although there are many things that could be good for me, there are many things that could be good for you, there are many things that I would like to have, many things that you'd like to have, there's still a hierarchy to those things. There is still a number one that's a little more important to me than that number two, no matter how shiny that number two might be. And for me, that number one is, again, the power of the clarity and the dedication that you can tap into when you simplify the focus of your life, single-pointed devotion to something, single-pointed focus on something. For me, that has given such brilliance to aspects of my life that whatever other shiny toy may creep up on the side saying, hey, why don't you pursue this or pursue that? I'm happy with my number one option. And I recognize desires 2, 3, and 4 sitting inside my psyche. But I'm happy to tell them, well, you're second place. So as long as you're not first place, you're not winning this battle.
So what is that? Do you have a mantra? Like, what is that reminder that you give yourself? Because I can definitely see how I overcomplicate things. And so even as you're talking, I'm like, okay, that sounds simple to do. And I'm like, but this, and this. Like, simplify, bitch.
It's two things that I do, I'll be honest with you. So one thing I recommend to people, and I try to help them get this practice into their life as much as possible, it is stilling your mind or calming your mind. And for that, yes, we do chant mantra. That is our main practice in our tradition. So the daily chant of up to 1 hour, I break it down. It can be 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there, but it aggregates into 1 hour, because it's really about giving my mind an anchor, and not just a random thing. I could chant random words all day. repeatedly, but for us, we chant the names of God, and those names, signify something. So, for example, the mantra in our tradition is in Sanskrit. It says it's Shri Vitala Giridhari Parabrahmane Namaha, and what it means is it's three names of God, Vitala Giridhari and Parabrahman, which means that God is my friend, God is my protector, and God is my essence. God is my foundation. And so just by chanting that for an hour a day, not only does it still my mind, it focuses my mind on something, but it also connects me to that. It connects me not only to the reality of God, but to the energy of those sentiments, those aspects, those facets of God. I never forget rather, that God is my friend, that God protects me, and that God is my foundation. That settles the heart. It settles the mind. It settles the disturbance that wants to overcomplicate things that need not be that complicated. That's one thing. But the second thing that I try to get people to do, that is a much more beginner-friendly practice, and I think something that everybody can do today, is I invite them to ask themselves three questions. And you can ask yourself these questions every day. You can ask them once a week, once a month, however you feel comfortable with it. But the three questions are the following. Question number one, who am I? And I don't mean esoterically. I don't mean like, oh, I'm a soul, I'm a spark of divinity. Because those things may be true, but it's a little too abstract for the mind to latch onto. So who am I for me means if I had to describe myself by my three best qualities, not the bad stuff, because you don't want to anchor your life around that. You may have faults, but what are the three best qualities that you believe you possess? And to state them clearly and to define that those are the things I embody. Okay? So who am I is the first question. The second question is, what do I want? And when you ask yourself that question, you'll probably come up with 5 or 10 answers. Okay? That's what typically happens. But the game, the exercise, is to now organize them into a list of priorities, into a hierarchy. And that can take a day. It can take a year. I've had people that come back to me years after and say, I still haven't figured out that list. Right? So question number 2 is, what do I want? And then question number 3 is, once you figured out question number 2, question number 3 is, what am I going to do to get it? What do I have to do to get this, to achieve this? And the answer to question 2 and the answer to question 3 cannot go against the answer to question 1. Meaning, if you've got to sacrifice who you are in order to achieve what you want, don't do it. It's not a good answer, right? So sometimes people find roadmaps of how they're going to achieve what they want to do, but to do that, they have to compromise on their principles, compromise on their values, compromise on the essential person they believe themselves to be, right? And that's a surefire way to a lot of suffering, a lot of disappointment. And so for me, those 3 questions have been a great, great tool to do exactly what you said in the beginning, which is, how do I simplify this mess? I asked myself these questions, and I gave myself a challenge that I realized quite early on. If it takes me longer than 10 seconds to answer these questions, my life's too complicated.
I can see how those questions could provide clarity, because I was vaguely answering them, the things that came up in my mind. And when I got to the, what do I want and what do I have to do it, I started thinking about, okay, so what was the spiral that was just happening in my mind this morning? I don't want to live here. This isn't the type of person I am. I just want to go shop. And then I was like, so if I had to take away the fundamental parts of who I am, I was like, do I really think that like my Los Angeles Uber Eats addiction is a fundamental part of who I am? Absolutely not. Is my love for the lit up Christmassy Grove a fundamental part of who I am? No. I mean, a little bit, maybe. I really like it, but no, it wouldn't be the top 3. And so it does force you to kind of see like, all right, these things that I want, they're not, or even the place I'm in right now aren't going against who I am. It's just some things I have loved to do, I suppose.
But that's not necessarily a bad thing. I also don't want to sort of paint a picture that those things that are not top 3 have to be dismissed. I just think that they need to be prioritized accordingly. That's all it is. And so I think sometimes we're not the best at valuing the things in front of us. That's all. We look at the shadow, right?
So how do you answer, who am I?
For me, I'm a servant of God. I mean, I know it's a a cliche answer for a monk, but it genuinely is my identification. And the qualities that I most sort of identify with that I think matter a lot to me. I'm an extremely loyal person. I'm an extremely courageous person. I do believe sometimes to my detriment. And I believe that I'm an honest person. And I think so long as I can remain honest, brave, and loyal to my mission, my service that I'm rendering, then I can't really fault myself. You know, whatever will come by the arrangement of the universe, the divine. Things will happen the way they have to happen. I just got to make sure that I'm showing up in the right way and honoring those things about me. And I've learned those things from my teacher. I've learned those things from my path. And if I can pass that on to anyone else a little bit, I do believe that human beings are incredibly contagious. We're really contagious people. You hang around negative people, you come back feeling negative. You hang around positive people, you come back feeling positive. And I think the same thing is true of brave people. I'm around people that are motivated, pumped up, courageous. I start to feel that surge inside of me where I'm like, where's this coming from? But I feel like I can achieve anything. And so I've achieved a lot in my life, and I've received a lot in my life from the people that I've had the good fortune of being around. And so if I can even pass on a little bit of that to the people that get to spend time with me, then I'm really happy to do it.
It's important to know, and we often are thinking of it as who is influencing us, but it also adds a little bit more responsibility to our way of being, what we're choosing, the energy we're choosing to bring into an environment.
And I think we can't shy away from that. You know, I think as much as it may sometimes feel unfair, but it's also like we don't live in a bubble. We live in a shared space. And so the way we show up in the world, we shouldn't be too into that space of, it's not my business what anybody else thinks. It's not my business what anybody else feels around me. It's like, well, no, I mean, the air's for everyone, and so is the energy, right? And so we need to be a little mindful of what we're outputting.
So you host a podcast called Thinking Bhakti. And
I do.
I haven't seen thinking and devotion often paired together, but it might be because of my religious background. So when I think of devotion, although I have been rewiring my ideas around this word, but my default of devotion has always kind of been unthinking. So why do you feel like these two things need to be paired together?
It's a great point. I think I've come from a similar background. I've come from a similar understanding, and that's precisely why I think they need to be paired together, because I think it's one just is weaker without the other. And I think the intersection of the mind and the heart is where a lot of the magic happens, and certainly a lot of the transformation. I've seen a lot of people that trust their heart, follow their heart, but their mind doesn't catch up. And because it doesn't catch up, eventually down the road, they have problems. They're easily shaken from what they're doing. They're easily disturbed. They're easily convinced of something else. And the same thing is true in reverse. People that are so mind stuck, mind orientated, everything must have nth degree of explanation and rationality behind it, when sometimes the most beautiful things in life don't work around that. It doesn't work that way. When you go to propose to someone, you don't put the pros and cons on a spreadsheet and start to map out a strategy. You just follow your heart. You follow what your heart's telling you. But I think that there's a time and place for both of those things, for the thinking mind to lead, for the feeling heart to lead. And so I think, why not explore how each relates to each other so that we can optimize our whole being and approach our lives, approach love, approach spirituality, nurturing both, not just one. I think a dumb, blind devotion is dangerous. I think a heartless intellect is equally dangerous.
So when you are conceptualizing devotion for someone, how would you do that?
I think it has to get practical. I think love is a verb for me. Devotion is a verb for me. And so what that looks like is, it looks like selfless service, for want of a better expression. It's about what you dedicate your energy to. And so service doesn't have to manifest as physical labor. I don't mean it in that sense. Service can manifest in 100 different ways. But it means that you dedicate yourself to something, and you do it with selfless nature. So it's not about personal gain. It's not about glory, because I've seen a lot of that. Look, I mean, one short story that sort of encapsulates this. We were fundraising once for a temple construction in our movement. And it was going okay, I would say. You know, people were donating a little bit, but of course we needed to ramp things up. The longer you wait, sometimes construction costs get more expensive. So we wondered, why is it that the people are not donating more freely? And so we just did something very simple. We said, hey, if you guys donate, we'll inscribe your name onto the altar of the temple. And within a couple of weeks, the whole temple was funded, right? And so what that shows you, I mean, and it's not just this incident. I mean, it's all the charitable donations in the world that come with a plaque with a person's name, right? Donated by person X. Is that behind every selfless act, when I say selfless like this, often there is still an ego wanting to be validated. There is often an ego that still wants to be recognized for being the good guy, for having done the good act. And so I think for me, devotion can't be built on that foundation. It can't be built on an ego hiding behind the bushes, an ego trying to sort of mask its self-interest as love, as dedication. I think love is not a self-interest based thing. Yes, you will benefit from it, but incidentally, as a side effect, not as the primary thing. You love because love is given for the sake of love. Love because you love the thing. You want to serve the thing. You want to give yourself to the thing. And so I think devotion has to be characterized in that way. It's about a selfless series of acts of services, mentally, physically, verbally, on all levels.
I was going through your Instagram, which good work, by the way. Several questions from that, because it just spawned a lot of things that I've actually thought about. And one of the videos that you had was around sort of misconceptions in the self-development world on the idea of knowing yourself. Share more about that, because that is something that comes up so often. It's like, well, you just have to get to know yourself. And people are like, well, where do I start? I should already know myself. Like it feels like it often pulls people in directions that aren't necessarily helpful or effective. So what do you have to say about what it really means to you to know yourself?
You're right. I think knowing myself to me means knowing what's most important to myself, knowing all facets of myself. I think there's two problems that I have with this general space. I think on the first hand, too often the people that want to help you in this, well, they also want something out of it. And so they're keen to show you the best parts of yourself, or something that leads to some kind of results quickly, because that's how they keep you interested, and that's how they keep you motivated to keep working with their models and their systems. I think that's okay, fair enough, I get it. Maybe somewhere lurking in my own intentions, something like that can sometimes hide in the shadows, and I'm keen to root that out, because I think if you're truly trying to help someone, you really need to make it about the person and not about you and what you may gain from it, right? And so I think that's something that's difficult in the space inherently. But I think to know yourself truly, it means to go as deep as you can. Okay, I can know my thoughts. I can self-analyze. I can know what attracts me, what triggers me, what I have aversion to. But again, I feel like there are moments in life where something deeper inside of us speaks to us, and there are things that move us more powerfully than the sort of trivial, incidental things of everyday life. And I wonder why it is that we only feel those things a few times in a life, perhaps a few golden moments where something really speaks to us so loudly and shines through. But because it does happen, and almost everyone I speak to can relate to that, then my point is, how can we tap into that more often, and how can we discover what it is that thing is saying every day, not just once in a blue moon? And so for me, it's all about going within. This is what my guru has taught me. The more I look outside, the more I'm allowing the world of ever-changing distractions to ingrain itself into my psyche. And so I think that I move further away from my essence. And so I have to look inside, even if it's just a few moments per day. But looking inside to me means lifting all the layers, all the masks, all the carpets and cupboards where I've hidden my dirty laundry, to see what's inside.
Does that process look dynamic to you? Is it interactive, or is it more just stillness and seeing what arises?
A little bit of both, because I think it's dynamic followed by stillness. Yes, you have to move, you have to dig, but eventually you have to let the water settle so that you can see through, right? And I think that sometimes there's too much digging, not enough silence. Sometimes too much silence, not enough digging. And so I think it is a combination of the two. Yeah, you have to work, but you also have to have enough stillness and enough patience to see what comes up.
Something you said, I don't remember where I saw it, but you were talking about how spiritual progress isn't measured by how much you love God, but by how well you've mastered your mind. And one of the things I've been called toward. When I started this podcast, Mind Love was really about that. It was all about mastering my mind. But what that has meant to me has changed over time. I used to be all about the rewiring, the kind of cognitive behavioral therapy, things like that. And then just my journey has led me more to the spiritual side. And I've seen that mastering my mind is actually figuring out how to make it take a back seat. How do I actually bring it down to my heart instead? And so I'm curious what mastering your mind has meant to you.
And what you just said resonated a tremendous amount with me. I was going to say, actually, Melissa, that mind love isn't so far from thinking bhakti either. I mean, it's not so different in that sense. But look, I think for me, it's not been about mastering the mind insofar as it means I am now in control of every thought. That wouldn't be a terrible outcome, but it's not so much that. I think it's more, it's how can I understand how it functions, expect what is to happen there. For example, my mind is an uncontrolled tool. It has the ability to grasp at any memory inside of me if it's triggered appropriately. My job in understanding and quote unquote mastering it is not to freak out when it happens. It's not to think something wrong has happened, something weird has happened, but rather to understand how to navigate those waters and sort of roll with the punches and continue to give priority to that which is most fundamental. Yeah, sure, that is the heart. I think perhaps even further down, my soul. And that is something that spirituality 100% will guide us more closely to than cognitive therapy does.
Yeah, and I think the reason I was guided in that direction was because I got to a point where I was getting really good at mastering my mind, but it started to feel like more like perfectionism than peace.
It's often a feeling of then what? Like, as in, okay, I've mastered my mind insofar as I don't allow it to disturb me as much as before. I feel more generally sort of intentional about my behaviors and my emotions. And I think that somehow peace is a platform for something else. I mean, peace is just the absence of problems in some sense. People define peace differently, but for me, peace is an absence of disturbance. But that's not the presence of something wonderful. That's just an absence of something bad. And so for me, it's very important to add the wonderfulness of life, the beauty, the love, as a sort of house that you build on top of the foundation of peace. So as far as that mind work helps me to just stabilize and helps to set the foundation, the real work is going to happen in there to build my dream house, which is all about love, beauty, and all associated things.
I was actually just reading how you can't gain more cold. It's just the absence of heat. And it reminds me of how, we're always talking about hatred existing in the world, but does it exist, or is it just the absence of love? And one thing I had shared on a podcast with somebody that apparently I changed my guest's life. She reached out to me a couple months later and she's like, you said something on that podcast about how when you're angry with somebody or when you're triggered by somebody, you're not feeling love in your body. And so often we're expecting the other person to give us love, or we don't have this relationship, so I can't feel love. But it's like, okay, well, even if somebody dies, is that love gone? Or it's just the reciprocation? What is that reciprocation? What is it exactly? Or are you just amplifying it or dimming it based on your perception of how it flows? And if you change your perception of how it flows and the source of it, could it change your experience of it?
I couldn't agree more with these sentiments. I think it's completely the right pathway to think about this. When I was made a Swami, so in our order, becoming a monk, you go through a novice phase, and then eventually you may become a senior monk. So a senior monk are the Swamis, they wear orange. Okay, so when I was first initiated as a Swami, my teacher, he pulled me aside and he said, look, I'm going to give you 2 lessons today that I want you to never forget, now that you have this responsibility. Okay, the first lesson is never make a relationship with somebody because of what you're going to get from them. I don't want that to be the reason why you build a friendship, build a connection, whatever it may be. The second thing is you always lead with respect. You give it first. You don't expect it, you don't demand it, and you don't reciprocate it. You give it. Because his problem is that he sees how often human beings wait for the other to initiate the affection, to initiate the kindness, to initiate the compassion, and then will reciprocate in the same vein. But the problem with that is that you become A, a slave to your environment, and B, you amount to almost nothing, because who are you when no one's looking then? Who are you when no one's acting out a particular way? It's easy to be kind to kind people. It's easy to be loving to loving people. But surely, if the world is lacking anything, it's proactiveness of love, proactiveness of respect, proactiveness of compassion, that you give it first. Let the others figure out whether they want to reciprocate it or not. That's on them. But I'm going to show up in the way that I choose to be, in the way that I believe the world needs more of. It's why I gave my life to this, because I believe that there's a huge lack. And the huge lack is in those values. And so therefore, it was one of the most wonderful things he could ever have said to me. I almost felt in that moment like I didn't need you to tell me anything else for the rest of my life, because that alone is a lifelong project. To learn to show up and give the best of me, whether I get it back or not.
It's hard to do when the ego is running the show. So it's always it's a good mirror to hold up to yourself. Like, if I cannot do this right now, then there is some other part of me driving me. But I'm interested in, you mentioned you had a similar background, religious background compared to your beliefs now. What do you think the primary differences are?
Well, my family's Brazilian. I was raised in Brazil and in Portugal, and sort of Latin Christianity, if I can call it such a thing. It's a very emotive religion, in a sense. It's a very emotive way of handling this. It's not as stoic. It's not as, let's say, principled in such a way. It's much more just, I don't want to say emotional in a sort of derogatory way. I don't mean it in that, but it's really very expressive to a fault. And so a lot of what I saw growing up or observing around me was people that were very comfortable with the fact that we will always have forgiveness, we will always have redemption, we will always have some kind of grace that can make up for anything that I'm falling short on. And so what I felt was a lot of, and I hate to say it, but it really was what I felt, a lot of hypocrisy. There were a lot of people doing things that I knew to be wrong, or that I felt they knew themselves were wrong, but they did it knowing that I have God's forgiveness on the weekend. I will be cleansed again, and I can, try again. But I knew they weren't really going to try again. They were going to do the nonsense again, knowing that they'll have the forgiveness again, right? And so it all was a very much like one step forward, one step back type of scenario for me. And so I think, and I'm not pinning this on Christianity by any means at all, but rather the sort of examples that I had around me at the time, the way I saw it at the time, maybe even. But definitely what I think that has changed drastically in my belief system, in my understanding since then, is that to have a relationship with God, whether Christian, Hindu, or anything else, I really don't see a difference in this point. You have to be sincere to what it means to show up and say, I am in a relationship with you. I love you as much as I want you to love me. And so that means I'm going to do my very best. I'm not going to be a hypocrite that makes no effort and expects you to carry my load. I'm not going to go to you and say, hey, God, I did my best this weekend, if I didn't actually do my best. And I won't come to you. I don't want to burden the people that I love. I grew up without much. I didn't have a rich family growing up. And I understood only when I was an adult how much my mother did to provide for me. As a kid, I didn't get that. I complained, Mom, why can't I have the toys that my friends at school have? And she would get sad, and I wouldn't understand. I just thought life is unfair. But my mom would be sad because she wanted to give it to me. She couldn't. She didn't have the means, right? I understood as an adult, wow, I must have made what was already a difficult situation even harder for her. I didn't know any better, but now I do know better. And knowing better, I would never want to burden somebody that I love, ever again. I wouldn't want to be ungrateful and complaining about something when I know the person that loves me is doing so much for me. And so I think when I look at spirituality, when I look at human relationships, when I look at God, all of those things, I look at through a lens of we're in a relationship, and relationships are two ways. It's so easy for me to just say how God should show up in my life and all the things that God ought to do for me. But what about the way I'm showing up? And so I've come to define spirituality as radical self-responsibility. For me, spirituality starts by a radical self-responsibility where I don't point the finger at anyone or anybody. I don't blame. I say, what can I do to change my situation at any given moment? And only once I've exhausted all options and I've really truly made my effort can I turn to God, can I turn to anyone and say, please help me, please give me grace.
That's beautiful. How do you conceptualize God that you think may be different from the average understanding?
Just far more expansive than the average understanding. I'm so saddened when I see God continuously limited to a particular culture, a particular language, a particular time in history, a particular whatever, because if there is a God, then it's a God of eternity. And that God of eternity is also a universal God. And if those two things are true, then he's everybody's God. He loves everybody. He doesn't have a discriminatory bone in his body, figuratively speaking. And I do not believe that a God of love would ever be as divisive as many of the God-centric traditions of this world would have you believe.
I want to ask about something that I feel like makes Westerners nervous. I know you're a disciple of Paramahamsa Vishwananda, I believe. And to outsiders, devotion to a guru looks like giving up power. So how do you know the difference between surrender and codependence? Or what is in that relationship that those who do not have a guru don't understand?
I think it's one of those things that it's almost impossible to appease someone's fears from the outside with any words. So I could give infinite number of explanations. I think it's something that you find out by living it, by experiencing it. Not necessarily saying, oh, commit yourself to him and then you'll find out. It's not what I'm saying. I think it's more when you have a mentor, when you have somebody that you truly believe possesses something that you desire, when you believe that somebody is in a different state of existence, it boils down to whether you believe such a thing is possible. Okay. And I wouldn't want to sort of pretend that it was otherwise. I think at some point as a Catholic, you believe that saints exist or you don't. As a Hindu, you believe that somebody can be enlightened or you don't. And if you don't, you're always going to look at somebody who does believe in that as being a little weird and doing weird things. And I think I wouldn't want to sort of begrudge that to someone. It's your absolute right to believe in the possibility of human experience and human attainment in that sense. Now, let's just, for the sake of discussion, assume that those things are possible. Okay, it is possible for somebody to reach some kind of transcendent state of existence. Okay, so a divinization of some sort, right? So if that would be the case, then for me to have a relationship with somebody like that is not at all an act of loss of power. First of all, at every step of this relationship has been a choice on my end. So I choose to dedicate myself. At any moment, I can choose to undedicate myself. There are no consequences or ties to that in a sense. I wear the orange today. If tomorrow I say, hey, don't want to do this anymore, I have plenty of stories of people that have done exactly that, and they continue on in their relationships and their lives in different ways. And so it's very much something that I believe empowers me in one key way, which is I want to learn from you what you have to teach me. Insofar as he continues to teach me that, I feel empowered in my goals. I feel empowered in the journey that I want to take. If you want to become the best doctor in the world, and then you're studying from a great doctor, and you're dedicating almost every waking hour to sort of following him, learning from him, listening to him, watching his example, because you want to be that, then every moment spent with that person feels like it's empowering your dream, empowering your vision of who you want to become. And so I think it really depends on the framework with which you look at this. I don't feel like a disempowered individual. I feel like that which I have chosen to do with my life, the reason I have intelligently and consciously chosen to align myself with him and to study under his guidance and leadership is because I see in him, I live have lived with him for many, many years, observing his everyday behaviors, and I see somebody operating with a set of intentions and at a level that I wish to operate with in my life. And so I'm really there, for want of a better expression, following in the footsteps of my mentor, my guide, and I don't see that as being problematic. I definitely can empathize. I definitely can understand, because I think cultural differences play a huge role, especially aesthetics, right? I think we sometimes ignore how much of an impact those things have. I'll give you one small example. When I went to Japan as a tourist, I was so impressed by how the way everybody greets each other, they were sort of bowing down to each other, right? And I felt like, okay, well, I mean, in the West, we don't bow to each other. We might shake each other's hands or something of the sort. And if you bow to someone, you're bowing to a king or a queen or superior of some sort. But they were bowing to each other as a normal practice. When I went to India, I lived 3 years in India in my youth, not as a Hindu. I was not a Hindu at the time, but I ended up in India for different reasons. And I was at an international school, and I traveled around the country, and then I saw school children touching the feet of their teachers, math teachers, chemistry teachers, not anything else. And I understood it as a cultural act of respect, nothing more. But again, to another set of eyes, another filter looking at that, I just think, wow, that's a little bit weird, isn't it? It's a little bit too much. And so I think sometimes there's a lot of that going on, and it can really make things look a little weird. And it can appear to be cults of personality, like, oh, I'm worshiping the personality of somebody. The truth is that I'm trying to emulate and drink from the source, the fountain that that person, I believe, has tapped into. So it's not about worshiping the person, but the person having love, selflessness, humility, dedication, whatever. I put those qualities on the pedestal of my heart and mind. I want those qualities in my life. And so for that reason, we follow a guru.
When you think about it too, well, one, I can see certain types of people having pushback on divine transmission of the guru. However, it's so easy to accept the transmission of the circles we hang out with. We're not pushing back quite as hard when somebody says, oh, you're the accumulation of the 6 closest people to you. I'm like, yeah, of course. But we're like, oh, but that doesn't make any sense. I'm just like, well, and then consider that person maybe has spent a lifetime or multiple lifetimes honing their energy. Would that not be stronger than Jim in accounting? You know what I mean? Who kind of gives you a negative streak at the water cooler. And then the other thing that comes to mind is I have a wound with Christianity. So we've talked a lot about deconstruction, and that's another thing I want to ask you about is dismantling judgment. And maybe it's because I'm an only child of a Christian mother who also is a little bit controlling. And so I get a lot of it. And so I always kind of feel a little on guard. But with the bowing to the feet, it seems ridiculous, or worshiping another person to an average person. And I can almost hear my mom's voice there. But in her very Bible, it talks about Jesus washing the feet of his disciples. And so it's just so interesting how we can just accept something. Oh, well, maybe that was a different time, and maybe that's how they justify it. But it's like, okay, but if you actually believe it was God on earth, wouldn't it be timeless? Would his culture change that much, or would he do the very thing here? And so it's just interesting. It's an opportunity to reflect on our own perception of things, and where else we might be holding an idea that we think is okay that doesn't match our current judgment.
I think that's absolutely true. I think like I said, I think so much of the uneasiness with it is because of blind spots. There are cultural things that we don't understand, we don't cross over well, or historical principles that we apply with a double standard. I think, to be honest, because one thing has been normal to our culture and something else is not. I think the way the disciples treated Jesus to a Christian is like, well, of course he was God on earth. But to a non-Christian, it's like, well, they're treating him the exact same way that, a Hindu or a Buddhist would treat their elder. it's difficult sometimes to talk across those divides, so to speak, because it just feels like there's a lot of judgment in the air, right? And there's a lot of unwillingness to look at things from a different angle, to take a different perspective on certain things. I mean, one example that I often learned or remarked is this. I mean, people talk about surrender as like, oh, you're just trusting things blindly, and that's very dangerous. And I sort of say, well, I mean, I get your point, but may I also just point out that we do this all the time. Like, we do this all the time. You go into a bus. Do you speak to the bus driver? Do you ask for his driving license? Do you check his credentials? You go to a restaurant, you order a meal. Do you know who's cooking your meal? Have you seen them? Do you ask for their credentials? Do you see the ingredients? Do you check if they're all? And they'll go, yeah, but all of those things have checks and balances. Sure. Use your own discernment. Any path has checks and balances. Use what feels authentic to you and what feels right, but don't come and act like you're not comfortable blindly trusting things every day. I hop on a metal box called a plane. I don't speak to the pilot. I go flying through the air. Not only do I sit there calmly, I fall asleep. That's how much I trust the experience, right? And so I think we're a little incoherent sometimes with these things. We don't think about these things as deeply as we should.
Yeah, I needed the plane example because I was immediately like, nope, I check every label at that grocery store. I barely shop the center aisle. I was like, oh, yeah, but I do sleep on the plane. So, okay, I see. Well, how do you follow your path with full devotion and manage to not have judgment towards other paths?
I don't. I do judge them. I judge
yes.
them.
Okay. My podcast is concluded. This is the final episode. This is all I needed.
Yeah, I definitely judge them more than I ought to. More than I ought to. And I think that's a work in progress, and that's the best honest answer I can give to you. I don't like it. I don't like it. I don't like what it does for me. I don't like what it does to me. But I don't deny that there is a tendency in me to do that. And I'm trying to transform that judgment more and more into a passionless discernment. Because for me, the difference between discerning something, knowing the difference between left and right versus judgment, is that judgment always has a certain spice into it. There's always some emotion into it. There's always some kind of negative energy packaged in that. And I can say something's not for me without getting agitated about it, without getting any kind of negative emotion stirring up inside of me. I can just say, no, that is simply incompatible with my way of seeing the world. That does not need me to cast mud on it. It does not need me to say it's wrong. It's just not for me. And I think that that's a much healthier way to getting there. I have managed to do that with a lot of things, especially human beings. That's for me the priority number one. I think every human is a child of God in whatever sense you want to think of it. And I think it would hurt the heart of a divine being if we were all fighting with each other all the time. So I do try to not do that. But I do see a difference between people and ideas. I'm a little less kind to bad ideas. And that's okay. Again, I think we have to be discerning. Discerning really is the right word. We have to be discerning, but try to be less judgmental. And definitely there are tools for that. Definitely there are practices I do to help me along that road. But the truth is that I still do it.
Thank you for that. I have practices. I learned from A Course in Miracles. Sometimes I'll just meditate on, I am willing to see this differently. I'm willing to see this differently. Before that, I think I felt as though I had to figure out how I was going to see it and then replace the thought. So that's sort of an example of the insight from that kind of mind mastering to like, okay, how do I surrender to something different? Somebody said something to me in an interview a couple months ago around how religious people are still steps ahead of many others because they're at least in communication with a higher power in some way that makes sense to them. That diminished a little bit of judgment for me because I was like, oh, I think I was looking at the religion I've been exposed to as kind of steps behind because it felt like there was a lot of unlearning I had to do from that to get to where I am, where it almost feels like it would have been easier to start from a clean slate. But I'm not sure about that. That might be my own judgment. Maybe it is better that I've always had a concept of God, even though it's drastically changed over the years. So give us some of your practices that have helped you, because I need to collect as many of these as I can.
First, allow me to just say that I actually, my experience has been that the blank slate is easier than changing someone who's already in something else. Rewiring a mind and the connection that mind makes with the heart is much more complicated than when someone comes and says, I'm curious. I don't have anything, no baggage. Just sort of show me what's up. I think that's always been
all right.
easier.
Screw that guy. I'm not using that trick anymore. Just kidding.
Techniques, it's, I know it's going to sound cliche, but it really is. Sorry, I really do believe this. The technique cannot be more complicated than just loving. And how that manifests for me is, you're right. Look, there is extreme value in having some form of connection to a higher power, no matter how twisted it may be, no matter how skewed it may be. At least that is something that can start getting you out of the mud. Okay? Because that higher power is not going to be dormant, is not going to be passively watching the nonsense without doing anything. They will sometimes prompt the heart. You may not take the invitation, but the invitations will come for people to change. And so I think that the best thing we can ever do is marry effort and sincerity, because I believe that God speaks the language of intentions. God speaks English, God speaks Sanskrit and Hebrew and whatever else. Whatever, God speaks intention. And for me, intentions are only ever heard, only ever bought. I buy into your intentions if they're married to effort and sincerity. I can offer lip service. I love you, I love you, I love you. I can say it 100 times. If I never sincerely put some effort into showing you that, into doing something about it, it's just words, empty words, right? And so I think the way to build a relationship with God, the way to come to a point of being able to forgive people, diminishing judgment, is in proximity to God. Become closer and closer to that source of love, and you will start to love the way God loves. God loves unconditionally, and it's a beautiful concept. It's a nightmare to live. It's a nightmare to pursue unconditional love because of how deeply uncomfortable it is. And it's like, okay, well, am I going to drop it because it's inconvenient? I have to start loving not the most wonderful people. I have to start making peace with not wonderful things. And it's like, making peace with it doesn't mean I'm saying it's good. Making peace with it does not mean I'm saying it's good. It just means that I'm not willing to go into the worst parts of me and to become something terrible because something else is terrible. Right? And so I think that it's very important. The practice is love. And so, yes, I said we chant the mantra with as much feeling as possible because I want to connect with God. I dedicate most of my waking hours to what we call seva, selfless service. I'm always doing something. Either I'm giving a class to someone or I'm going out and teaching meditation, guiding meditations. Sometimes I'm just spending time with people, just talking, helping people see things differently, helping us to just think about positive, good things. And I think that you have to just consistently dedicate your life to the upliftment of yourself and others. Our most important text for us is the Bhagavad Gita. And in the Bhagavad Gita, there's a beautiful sentiment. Krishna says to Arjuna, he says that you should live your life motivated by loka sangraha, which means the welfare of all beings. So at every given moment, you should be doing things thinking, how can I impact the most number of people as possible positively? And the truth is that the more you do that, I don't know what the science behind it is. I don't know what the trick is, but you put a smile on someone else's face, you start to smile. When you can truly uplift people and you can truly do good for people, you are doing the best for your own heart. And I don't think that there's anything more attractive to God than a loving person, a kind, loving person. And I think that the same way when you're trying to woo a person into a relationship, when you're in the courting phase, you want to present yourself as attractive as possible to attract the right partner. And I think with God, there are attitudes that repel God, that make God say, I'm not interested. I'm allergic to this. Arrogance. Arrogance is chief amongst them. Pride. Hypocrisy. These are things that I believe deeply repel love, repel the divine from coming into contact with us in in a serious way, in a meaningful way. God's always in everyone's heart. I don't say no, but God can be there dancing, or God can be there sleeping. And I think in a lot of these hearts, God is sleeping. He's like, look, I'll never abandon you. I'll be here, but I'm not interested in what's going on up there. The quality of how you're living, what you're thinking, what you're doing, it's poor. And I think that when you start to embody the best that humankind has to offer, God can't resist you. You don't need to chase God. God chases you.
How do you grow your influence in the way that you are? Because you're always, as you said, engaging in acts of service. And so therefore you are coming in contact with so many people. You have a platform, you're coming on podcasts. How do you balance the ego with the growth of your own influence?
I've only ever known two ways that people learn anything in life. Either you bang your head against the wall enough times until you realize maybe I should stop doing this, or the smarter option, you listen to the wisdom of those that have walked the path before you. So there have been a lot of people that have done exactly this and had their egos pumped up, and then they've sort of had the fall, got back up on the horse, and they've told the world about it, right? It's not all that it's made out to be. Be careful, make sure you're doing it for the right reasons, etc., etc. We tend to be stubborn creatures. If somebody tells you don't put your hand in the fire, you go, sure, I won't. And then you do it anyway. And you put it one way and you think, oh, that hurt, but maybe I put it wrong. So you flip your hand, you put it the other way, and you think, oh, that also hurt. Maybe this way. And we are stubborn like that. We think next time I'll get it right. And we do these things a lot. And so honestly, how I learned? The stubborn way. I didn't listen to the wisdom around me. And so I got burned a few times because of too much ego. I would do things, people would either praise me for it or just thank me for it. It's not even praise, just thank me for it. Say, wow, you made such a difference in my life. You know? And yeah, if you're not in the right headspace, instead of giving the respect to that experience, instead of feeling the gratitude for that experience, instead of giving the grace to God in that experience, you say, damn right, I did do that. Because I've put in the work and I'm great now. Right? And the problem with that is that the minute you start to think that way, the minute you start to embody even a bit of that, you will start to see the effects that that has. And you do it enough times, you start to really see the effects of that. And so eventually, enough of those bad effects, those bad experiences, they'll set you straight. And so now, do I recommend this to everybody? No. I don't recommend you to learn that way, but you're guaranteed to learn that way one way or another eventually. If you want to save yourself some heartache and some difficult relationships and difficult conversations, then instead of being like a rock that the water hits and just splashes off, be like the sponge that absorbs the wisdom that you receive and say, do you know what? I'm not going to test the fire. I'm not going to put my hand on it. I'm going to say, okay, ego is a dangerous thing. So here's what I'm going to do. Next time I give that public lecture, I'm not going to hang around afterwards to have those conversations with those people. I'm going to come, I'm going to give my service, and I'm going to walk away. Because I don't need to stick around for the adulation. I don't need to stick around for the afters. I have come, I have given my service, I can walk away. Right? I don't need to scour through my YouTube videos, checking every single comment to see who liked me and who didn't like me. I don't need to do that to myself. I just need to make sure that I'm focusing on giving the best quality service. That's what I'm here to do.
There is nothing lost or wasted on this path. That's one of the lines I remember that sticks out to me a lot. Another one that provides guidance even still is, you have the right to your actions, but never to the fruits of your actions. And that is, I mean, we learn this on the path in so many different ways. I learned it before the Bhagavad Gita, before I had been introduced to it, but of somehow the idea of letting go of the outcome, just focusing on the next steps. But there's something about the way it's written there. You have the right to your actions, but never to the fruits of your actions. That sealed that in, what it actually meant for me. And usually it's the other way around. Usually it's the layman's language that helps me understand the spiritual text. But no, this one, it's something I come back to time and again, because so often things don't turn out the way we have planned in our mind. But what if that was never the plan. It was just my plan. And is my plan as good as the divine plan? Probably not. Well, I have pretty good plans, so.
I often think so too, about my own plans. I'm like, come on, God, this is a pretty good plan.
No, you want to partner up on this one? Well, if you were to be remembered for one thing that you left in this lifetime or you inspired in this lifetime, what would it be?
That I was able to inspire people to love God and to experience the love of God. I don't particularly care much about anything else. Because I think at the end of the day, all these other things pale in comparison.
Well, for listeners that want to learn more from you, where's the best place for them to connect?
It would be my podcast on YouTube, that is Thinking Bhakti. I mean, that's where they can listen more to what I'm saying, the conversations I'm having. And if they want to contact me, it's through my Instagram. I'm actually right now, we're opening a center in New York City, in Manhattan in January. And so that's been a lot of where my time and energy has been dedicated to. So I've put a pause on the podcast for a while now because it's been a lot of work. So if anyone wants to meet me in person, New York City it is. And if not online, then it's on my YouTube channel and my Instagram.
Want to work through this week's Mind Love Challenge with others? The Mind Love Collective is a free community with monthly themed calls, weekly challenge accountability, and real support throughout the year. So join us at mindlove.com/join. Thanks for giving your mind a little love today, and I'll see you next week.